Hey guys, this is Hell Hades. This is a Raid Shadow Legends video. Guys, I can't log into Raid right now. Don't know what's going on. So I figured I'd do a bit of a deep dive into Raid Shadow Legends. How's it performing? How's it doing versus the market? Is it still on the up or is it now on the decline? We're going to do a deep dive. I tend to do this about once every couple of months in like a real deep dive, and probably every few weeks just in terms of managing a business which generally is focused on Raid Shadow Legends. So quite some interesting stuff here. We're going to do a dive into Aristocrat, who own Raid, into their annual reports and see what they've got to say about their kind of big flagship game. Is it still big on their radar? We're going to be looking at Google Trends. We're going to be looking at their financial performance. And we're going to be looking at some of the stuff which is kind of closer to me, which is like the Hell Hades stuff as well. So bit of a different video. But if anyone likes stats and numbers, then this is going to be an interesting one for you. I will say, like, I used to be a sales director for a company called Cisco, which is like a big blue chip food service provider. And I had to kind of troll through reports. I had to set big targets for my teams and that type of stuff, going after like big multi-million-pound businesses. So it is something which I'm used to doing, albeit I used to have like an accounts dude sitting beside me where we were like looking at the deep dive numbers, and then I'd be kind of like getting the actions out of the back of that. So I'm not saying I'm an accountant, but I do kind of have some understanding of this stuff. So yeah, for those who don't know, Aristocrat own Raid Shadow Legends. We're going to be looking at their annual reports towards the end of this. But let's start at the basics here. Let's have a look at Google Trends. Are people still looking for Raid Shadow Legends? Yeah, this is always a nice place to start. You can kind of see back in 2019, like March 2019, Raid kicks off, and really it's been a pretty decent uptrend in terms of search results right the way through till the start of this year. Yeah, around January or December to January of this year, basically it kind of hit its peak. And then since then, we've just started to see a little bit of a downtrend. And in this month in particular, we're at a kind of low point, probably like a 6-month low point. We've noticed in our trends, and I'll show you this in a minute, on the website, actually Raid tends to dip off around this time and then comes back a bit later on in the year. So quite interesting that it's kind of following that same trend. One of the things I like to do, though, is throw other games in the mix. Like in terms of Google Trends, how does it compare to other stuff that's blowing up? Yeah, so there was this Diablo Immortal kind of big blow up back in, what was this, May, June 22. And you can see like this big spike. This is when something really smacks all over Google. And then actually it came back down pretty quickly. Like within a few months, it was back below Raid Shadow Legends. But you can see the kind of impact of a big title. What's quite interesting, you can literally throw anything in. So I could be like, okay, Genshin Impact, another big game, probably a bit bigger than Raid. Yeah, you can see it. It almost puts Raid into this kind of like obscurity when you throw something on top. So it does give you a little bit of, I guess, relevance in terms of the numbers. But actually, Raid has kind of held a pretty steady flow of interest and a slight upturn of interest since it came out. Okay, let's get into some of the numbers then. So looking at Plarium, this is on Sensor Tower. Anyone could go here for free. This is what I'm doing. You can pay to get more reports and stuff. This is just a free view. So Sensor Tower tells you things like how many downloads does a game have, what sort of revenue is it earning, etc. And there's a couple of things which are quite interesting to me here. So Raid or Plarium continue to earn good cash, right? But this is the lowest number I've seen since I've been doing this type of deep dive. So Raid last month, just in terms of app revenue, don't forget they're pushing a lot towards Plarium Play. So their app revenue is at 6 mil, whereas it's normally closer to 10. So this is a bit of a lower month for Raid for sure. Now, given that they're doing the kind of live arena push and the Call of the Arbiter push and all that type of stuff, it's actually a bit of a drop down. I'll also say that Mech Arena, which is their second biggest game, is massively catching up Raid in terms of downloads per month. Yeah, this is normally way higher. This is normally a lot more, more like 1 million. Yeah, so you can see that either Raid's marketing has eased off, or they're just getting less new users through the door than they were. This is definitely something which I looked at because, ultimately there's a life cycle to a player, and I want players to play the game because I do content on the game. So this is something that I'll just be keeping an eye on. Again, it might just be down to that kind of dip at this time of year. The other thing is Mech Arena is actually starting to make some cash. Like Mech Arena now, what's that, like 20-ish%, no, a bit less, about 18 or 17% of Raid Shadow Legends. So they're actually bringing something to the table now, which they weren't if I think back to the last deep dive that I did. So that's definitely interesting. If we then go on and look at Raid Shadow Legends as a game, so they're involved in a whole bunch of different categories on this type of view, whether it's role-playing games, free games, paid games, that type of stuff. So, but it does just kind of give me a feel for how are they performing. I'll go on to the next one, so it's probably easier to see. So this one I've just looked at, role-playing games. I can only look at one country at a time, really. So we're looking at US. I'm looking at this on Google Play, which is where the majority of Raid's players do play. So this is their majority. I've looked over the last 3 months, and you can see here Raid basically are first or second for top grossing role-playing game like forever. Every now and again they drop down to second, but pretty much they are top one. And in terms of top free game over the last few months, again, they kind of like a top 10 free game on the Google Play Store in role-playing. So they're kind of maintaining that. They're still seen as the best in class for this type of game. And if we then compare them to other well-known games, and these are the games that people tell me about a lot, or I've played myself. So I've called out Eternal Evolution, Diablo Immortal, which at one point, remember when that peak happened, overtook Raid. We've got Summoner's War on here, Marvel Contest of Champions, I think this one is, and then Dislight. And you can see, so Dislight's purple at the bottom here, tracking in the kind of, no, sorry, that's Summoner's War is purple. Wow, Summoner's War is way less than I thought it'd be. But I guess it's an older game now, 309, or kind of coming in here around 260 at this point. Eternal Evolution then in the top 200. But then you've got Dislight 43rd. That's better than I thought it'd be. And Diablo Immortal is literally just like one spot below Raid. So Diablo Immortal, albeit felt like it wasn't that well received, in this space, it still performs actually very well. Okay, then let's talk about some view of what we get in the website here. So I get some pretty decent information just from our analytics from the website. And you can kind of see over the last year and a half, really. No, it's over the last couple of years, how the website has grown in terms of, they call it event count. So it's basically people coming to the site and doing something, like viewing a page or whatever. And this might just be that Google now pushes us better, because you can see we're growing at a decent rate. Anyone who's got a site that's doing this would be pretty damn happy with that. From when we launched to now, it's like a steady growth. There was a drop-off point when the conflict in Ukraine happened, and actually it's kind of like been continuing to grow since that point. And then you can see here, it's actually quite interesting. So you can see a couple of real spikes. And some of this is when they just do big promotions. So, when you did like the Ronda Rousey, the Ninja promotion, the big kind of release of Call of the Arbiter, they just show as big spikes to us in terms of traffic. So that's interesting to see. But again, steadily uptrending in terms of users, new users. And this is quite interesting. It kind of shows us a year on year. So the kind of dotted line is year on year. And you do see similar trends of traffic, both downwards and upwards at certain times. So it's probably when Raid basically release more marketing capital into their game. And similar sort of thing here for users. So generally, things look like they're on a bit of a, I'd say on generally everything we've seen, it looks like they're on an up, apart from that performance thing where we were looking at the kind of numbers from Plarium. That's the first kind of watch out I've seen for a long time. If I then look at myself, like as a YouTuber, my views have probably plateaued, I would say, since, probably in the last year, I've just hit this kind of peak. And I've not broken above this kind of, general like a 3 million view per month. Really, I've had a couple of spikes above it, but generally I've now hit a bit of a flat line. which is the first time I've done it in some time. So, from when I started to probably 2.5, 3 years in, it was pretty much just always going up. Whereas now we've hit this kind of flat line, which is, again, it kind of correlates with everything else we're seeing, right? Raid with Ash, with Ash's channel here is, I'd say, more volatile than mine, which is unexpected. But Ash is seeing quite a lot of growth at the moment, which is interesting. So need to go and check out what he's up to that's kind of different. But he's definitely got a bit more of a peak of growth over the last maybe 6 months. So he's now hitting close to sort of 2.5 million views on a monthly basis. Good job, Ash. Dub Raids is another one that I generally just pick out 2 or 3 to have a look at. Dub Raids is kind of like, I'd say it's probably a bit of a flat overall, but again, kind of month to month, depending on what he's up to, pretty solid. So solid kind of, standard of view. So all in all, everything to me looks like we're getting to a point where Raid has peaked and it's now kind of hit, it looks like it's hit this kind of like plateau of how many viewers, how many players are going to be playing Raid, unless they do something dramatic. So let's dive into Aristocrat's annual report. So this is their 2022 filed report. And I'm just going to pull out some bits which I think are most relevant to Raid. But let's start by understanding Aristocrat's scale. Yeah, so as a overall business here, they had a profit result of 1.1 billion. Yeah, this is a massive beast of a company, Aristocrat. And they actually own a whole ton of different divisions. So Aristocrat are, I guess by trade, they're gambling companies. Yeah, they own things like the slot machines in big casinos, that type of stuff. They also own Pixel United. Plarium is part of Pixel United. And they own Aristocrat Gaming, which is more like gaming apps. Yeah, so not gaming apps, sorry, casino apps. Yeah, so like slot machine apps, that type of stuff. So they've got a few different divisions, but they are a big, big business. Okay. So 1.1 billion in profit for the year, which is kind of nuts. Bit was that I was interested in terms of what we're related to here. So outstanding performance delivered in key gaming segments. Where did I want to just come to here? Yeah, delivering a portfolio performance in the US of 1.4 times the floor average. So exceeding what other kind of competitors are doing in this space. And they've said here as well, this includes impacts from the conflict in Ukraine. So obviously they're just kind of recognizing here that the conflict in Ukraine did affect Pixel United. And specifically, it would have been a big part of that would have been Raid. So if we look at their numbers at a glance here, so they're basically breaking down the different businesses and where their revenue is coming from. So 5.6 billion in revenue, 46% of that came from Pixel United. Yeah, so a big chunk of their revenue is actually in Pixel United, which is their kind of gaming division. And that's something to be aware of, because companies this sort of size, they don't like to have massive risk, and they might see this as a bit of a risk if the kind of Raid scene and the gaming scene is taking a bit of a downturn. So if we move on here, and actually talk about this in a bit of detail. So they say on page 14 here around the operating and financial review, strong resilience and strategic focus in Pixel United. Yeah, and they basically say retained leading positions in key genres. So slots, casino games, #1 in squad RPG, that's going to be Raid. And then everything else pretty much is talking about casino stuff. Okay. So they're very good in that scene. They also talk here about Pixel United moved proactively to cease operating its mobile games in Russia during the year. Yeah, again, because of the conflict. And this hit them for 3% of their overall, they call it bookings, but that's basically sales in Pixel United. So this has definitely made quite an impact in terms of their business. But I actually thought it would be more than that. 3% is big, but it's less than I thought it was going to be. Okay, so if we then get into the kind of financial review here, 2021 versus 2022, this is really interesting. So Pixel United land 2.6 billion, let's call it, in sales. Yeah. And in terms of profit, that's 850 million of profit, of which Raid is a very healthy share. So Raid is still bringing in the big bucks. Yeah, it's still bringing in the absolute kind of massive revenues that a business would want. And it's bringing it in a really profitable way. Basically, a third of their sales is coming in as profit, which is a massive, massive, it's a massive part of their business. If you look at their overriding profit for the whole business, 2.4 billion, it's a third of their overriding profit is coming from Pixel United here. So then I just wanted to kind of have a little bit of a breakdown of, what does that look like year on year as well. So Pixel United have actually dropped. You can see in terms of their kind of percentage swing. So revenue declined, basically because mobile bookings, so mobile sales are down 5% across the industry. That's going to be something to do with the kind of economic downturn as well, and as well as the conflict in Russia and the cease of operation in Russia. Against this backdrop, Pixel United delivered a resilient portfolio performance driven by the strength of social casino franchises Lightning Link, Cashman Casino, and Raid Shadow Legends, and the launch of Mech Arena. So the fact that they're calling out specifics in these type of documents, generally it's only if they're really big hitters for a company the size of Aristocrat. Yeah, they'll be pulling out the ones that the investors will want to hear about. So the last one, which I wanted to show you, and this is really interesting actually. So they kind of look at the bookings. So again, this is their sales by genre, social casino, casual. This is for Pixel United in particular, and RPG. So out of that 1.8 billion revenue, or they call it bookings. I'm not sure if that's directly revenue because you've got revenue as a separate line, but it's pretty much the same thing. Out of that 1.8 billion, 630 million comes from RPG, strategy, and action. So it's about a third of Pixel United's business is going to be coming from Raid. I don't know if... I guess Mech Arena is going to be in here as well. So it's probably something along the lines of 600 million would be Raid's revenue on an annual basis. And if they're making that same type of 30% profit to 600 million, basically a third of that, a couple hundred million is going to be profit due to Raid Shadow Legends. Massive, massive numbers for a business of this size, okay? But this is the line which was kind of shocking, actually. This is the first time I've seen this. I've always said to people, like, Raid is a cash machine for Aristocrat. There's absolutely no way they're looking to part company with Raid, okay? And I still hold by that. But this line here was interesting. So they say here, role-playing games, strategy, and action contributed 630 million, a decrease of 0.4% compared to prior corresponding period. This is mainly due to a decline in revenues from Raid as this world-class title moves into profit mode. Vikings offset by growth, and Vikings, sorry, offset by growth in Mech Arena. So basically what they're saying here is Raid moving into profit mode. What does that mean? It probably means that there's less money being flowed into development for future kind of iterations of the game. And it's more about now, how do we maintain the player base that we've got? How do we try and continue to attract new players? But it's probably with less marketing cash than they've done in the past. Because ultimately, they see it as a game that has kind of had its heyday, which really comes in line with everything else we've been looking at here. So very interesting. Do I think that Raid Shadow Legends is doomed? No, I don't think so, because it's still making insane amounts of cash for this company. But it's definitely a watch out for me and the kind of like HH Gaming crew to see what happens over the next 6 months. But there you go, guys. Bit of a deep dive into Raid. Let me know your thoughts on it down below. I've been Hell Hades. I'll see you later.